Men are spitting shits from their mouths. This phenomenon is in the news. The host spits out shits, leaving an elderly couple stunned. This is becoming more common. Experts also spit shits, and some even appreciate it. Celebrities endorse and promote shits. People imitate this behavior. Kindergarten teachers instruct children to spit out shits, taking pride in it. Shits become a religious belief. Priests spit out shits, and followers join in. The internet is filled with shits. The country turns into a shits nation. A peculiar-looking person becomes president, passionately spitting about shits with a cheering crowd. Streets are filled with shits. A minority resists trying to clean up, but overwhelmed by passers-by who drown them in shits. An elderly couple at home witnesses this, also spitting out shits and submerging themselves. The city turns into ruins. Tanks spit out shits, and shits completely take over. What's it like when humans and animals swap identities? They're living in the woods. Suddenly the animals come in and start cutting down the trees. Humans are forced to flee. The TV is showing danger of garbage. People are picking it up. Animals don't realize the seriousness of the situation. Finished drink bottles were thrown into the river. The bottles flow downstream with the current. It was picked up by a human, and he lost his life. The human is swimming happily in the sea, but they can't escape being caught. The baby's left behind, growing up in an environment full of garbage, and she can't get away from the garbage. Animals continue to indulge in a life of luxury. Pollutant gases blanket the globe. News begins to report on the dangers of environmental change. Glaciers are melting. Mankind sank to the bottom of the sea. The number of human beings is decreasing. Eventually, mankind becomes a museum piece. Psychopath paints shit on the wall. The nurse was disgusted by this behavior. The man gave the nurse a thumbs-up gesture. Nurse picked up a stick and hit the man with it. The next day, the man's hands were tied up. He screamed wildly. The nurse gestured for him to be quiet, but the man kept screaming. The nurse took out the stick and knocked the man to the ground. On the third day, the man didn't give up. He tried to break free from the ropes. The nurse appeared. She came at the man with tools in hand, and every following day, no matter what the man did, it resulted in the nurse beating him. The man's behavior became more and more unusual. He even developed a skill for withstanding blows to the head. One day, the man acted very normally. The nurse thought she had entered the wrong room. She went forward to observe the man's behavior. The man took this opportunity to grab the nurse's stick and knocked the nurse to the ground. The man turned into a savage. When he's thirsty, he picks a fruit from a tree, eat it to quench his thirst. When he's hungry, catch a fish in the river. Then he started drilling wood for fire. Suddenly, a tall building rises from the ground. He tried to escape, but he couldn't move. His feet were bound by his shoes, and he's wearing a suit on his body. He was surrounded by buildings behind him. The city had squeezed him to the bone. The next moment, the job was mercilessly placed on the desk. A voice kept appearing in his ears. He decided to get up and look for it. Running through the city, following the direction of the sound, he finally came to this place. Behind him, others appeared one after another. In front of him was a primitive man beating a drum. They danced together. This state makes them feel a joy they've never felt before. Suddenly, the men's watches rang. The others stopped at the sound. The man tried to take it off, but he couldn't. Soon they're back to their modern state. They start running back. The man fell to the ground in fear, but in the end he couldn't escape. He had to return to the real world.
A man's legs turned into a fish tail because he had just eaten a fish. The family were having dinner. After eating pig's trotters, Dad sprouted pig ears. A boy who ate a chicken leg soon grew a comb and tail feathers. Those who loved steak now had 2 horns on their heads. That day a person appeared and caused the horned brothers to scream. Their cries attracted other villagers, who all rushed over. The protagonist was a normal man. The villagers' eyes were wide open. Then he took a blade of grass from his pocket, ate a bite, and the villagers seemed to understand. After eating the grass, the man's fish scales began to recede, and the horns started to shrink. Everyone began to eat grass non-stop, trying to revert to human's appearance. After many plates of grass, only part of his foot retained fish scales. But he couldn't resist, took out some fish meat and took a bite. the fish scales reappeared. In the end, he turned into a fish and jumped into the water. The man in the mask smelled a fragrance. He entered the crowd, saw two men in a dispute. One mask deduced was a driver who had hit a skinny man, then bullied the skinny man further. The crowd turned into demons, criticizing the man relentlessly. No matter how the man explained, no one believed him. The man tried to snatch a backpack, but was restrained by those around him. More people learned of the incident, transforming into demons, joining in the criticism of the man. Even children donned masks, becoming part of the demons. The man couldn't escape, he was devoured by the demons. Then a woman appeared. She snatched the backpack from the skinny man, checked if anything was missing inside. It turns out the skinny man was a thief. He had stolen the woman's backpack. The man was catching a thief. The police arrived at the scene, commended the man for catching the thief. Then a doctor came. After examination, the man was found to have no life left. But the demons did not reflect, they found their next target. The child was released into the sky like a kite. The man walked a few steps, and his hat flew off. He pulled a new hat out of his bag and put it on. The man on the chair took off his hat, showing a head grown to adapt to strong winds, so that his hat wouldn't blow away. The men stood in a row, getting haircuts in the direction of the wind. At that moment, a yellow liquid flew onto the barber's face. Ahead, an old man was walking his dog. The wind was so strong it lifted the dog into the air. A very large man appeared. He opened a manhole cover and climbed down. The man was constantly turning machinery. When he stopped, the wind also subsided. The child fell from the sky, and the little dog also tumbled to the ground. Without the wind to lift the hair, the barber accidentally cut off the customer's nose. The man's head was already wearing many hats. In the basement, they made an exchange. The man continued to crank the machine, and the wind in the small town picked up again. A mother walks her son using the umbilical cord. Onlookers walking their dogs are astonished. This boy's mother refuses to cut the umbilical cord, keeping him attached to her. When it's time for school, his classmates mock him. They use his umbilical cord for jump rope and tug-of-war. Angry, his mother takes him out of school. As he slowly grows up, he begins to be attracted to women. One day the boy disappears. His mother follows the direction of the umbilical cord, finding him on a date with a girl. Just as the boy and girl are about to hold hands, she pulls him back. The boy is furious. He picks up scissors, wanting to cut the umbilical cord. At that moment, his mother faints. Afraid of losing his mother, he reluctantly chooses to continue obeying her. Many years later, the boy hugs his mother in bed. A shadow appears outside the window, taking his mother away and cutting the umbilical cord. Now a man in the room, he feels an immense pain.
The Mudman wanted to clean up the mud, but the floor became dirtier. A box appeared in the room. The Mudman tiptoed over to find cleaning supplies inside. He used it to wipe the floor. The mud gradually disappeared. To avoid dirtying the floor, it stood on the rag. Another box appeared. The Mudman moved over by stepping on the rag. However, he fell. Angry, he walking heavily to the box. He found clothes inside. He put it on, but accidentally put both legs into one pant. Unable to walk properly, he fell again. Feeling sad, the Mudman sat on the ground crying. He took off the clothes, scraped off the mud and formed a lump. He threw the lump against the wall. On the other side of the wall, another Mudman was painting on the wall. Using the mud and pigments, he made the room colorful. He beckoned, and a box arrived. The Mudman watched all of this in amazement. They looked at each other. The Mudman suddenly thought of something, and a box appeared in his room.
The mountain rubbed oil on his face. The hill applauds with excitement. The other mountain inside of his body is full of gold. Even his teeth were made of gold. The hill gave him an envious look. There was another big mountain of volcanic rock. At that moment, all three big mountains looked at the little mountainside. He confidently pulled the stone out of his mouth, but the three mountains laughed at him. The floor shook with their jeers. They even threw the stone away. The hill looked at his stone. He felt aggrieved and threw the stone. The three mountains were secretly planning. They gathered the clouds and made a dark cloud, and placed it on the hill's head. The next day dawned. The hilltop was surprised to find a shoot growing out of its mouth. Suddenly, a lot of pine cones fell from the sky. Three big mountains were flooded. A squirrel appeared. He punished three big mountains for the little hillside. At this point, the hill is no longer the same hill. A huge tree had grown above it,